Hey guys, tonight we crawl straight into the belly of the medieval beast. You're not arriving at a grand feast hall or even a cozy inn. Nope. You push open a creaking wooden door into something far rowdier, grimier, and smokier than you'd ever imagined. Welcome to the local tavern, your new favourite place to regret visiting. The first thing that hits you is the smell. Not a single scent, more like 10 of them, fighting in your nose. Roasted meat, wet dog, fire smoke, sour ale, and something you'd swear was cabbage left out in the sun too long. Your eyes sting. Not from tears of joy, but from the heavy wall of wood smoke curling out from the hearth. There's no chimney, just a hole in the thatch, and even that's struggling to keep up. You duck beneath the low door frame and feel every eye swivel toward you. Not out of curiosity, just habit. Everyone here knows each other, and you, with your cleanish tunic and bewildered face, don't belong. The moment passes. A man spits on the floor. Another wipes his nose on his sleeve and goes back to his drink. Welcome. The inside of the tavern is darker than you expected. One rushlight flickers over the hearth, dripping fat onto a dirty saucer. A single tallow candle leans dangerously in a crooked holder near the bar. Most of the light comes from the fire, and even that seems more smoke than flame. You can barely make out the far wall through the haze. The building creaks with every step. Floorboards, if you can call them that, are little more than warped planks laid over packed earth. You shuffle forward, trying not to trip on a stray boot, a chicken, or someone's leg sticking out from under a bench. It's not clear whether the man it's attached to is drunk or dead. No one seems concerned either way. The bar isn't a polished surface. It's a scarred wooden plank held up by 2 beer barrels. Behind it stands a woman with thick forearms and no patience. Her apron is stained, her hair tied back with a rag that might once have been white. She grunts when you approach, not a greeting, just a warning. You point to the barrel behind her. She nods, slaps a wooden mug onto the plank and starts pouring. The liquid that splashes in is cloudy, with bits floating. Not foam, bits. You try not to think about what kind. She hands it over without a word. You hand over your coin. The mug is sticky. Your hand is already wet. You bring it to your lips cautiously. The ale tastes like wet bread and sadness. But here's the thing. It's safer than water. That part is real. Boiling the wort during brewing killed most of the bacteria that made river water a gamble. So yes, it's murky. Yes, it might have been watered down, thickened up, or spiced with something strange. But at least it won't make your stomach revolt the same way the village well might. A man behind you coughs, loudly and long. He hawks and spits near your boot. You take another sip. The fire crackles suddenly, sending sparks into the air. 2 boys in the corner cheer as if that's the most exciting thing that's happened all week. One of them is barefoot. The other wears a single glove. Both are chewing something, probably stolen bread crusts, and watching you like you might turn into their next distraction. You find a corner seat. It's sticky too. The bench creaks beneath you, and the table wobbles. You rest your mug and lean back. Around you, voices rise and fall. Laughter, curses, a shriek of surprise as someone drops a jug. The floor slurps it up like it's been thirsty all day. And still, you stay. Because there's something about this place. Something raw. Something alive. It stinks. It's loud. It's filthy. But it's real. You came looking for the truth about medieval taverns, and tonight you're going to live it. You lean in, letting your ears adjust to the rhythm of the room. The tavern has its own pulse. Wood groaning, mugs thudding, voices weaving into a kind of chaotic lullaby. It's not musical. It's more like survival humming in public. A man 2 tables down lets out a wheezing laugh and slaps his drinking partner so hard the poor soul nearly tips over. You catch bits of their chatter. Something about a sheep, a ditch, and a very regrettable misunderstanding. You decide not to ask. There's a woman crouched near the hearth with a child on her hip. Not hers, probably. She's wiping a wooden bowl with the hem of her dress, checking it for weevils, maybe, or just pretending to clean it. The child sucks 2 fingers and stares at the fire like it's telling him a secret. The warmth is concentrated there. Everything else in the tavern is cold. Your hands are already stiff, and you regret not standing nearer to the hearth when you came in. But there's a whole kingdom of unspoken rules about seating here, and violating them could get you more than a dirty look, like a black eye, or worse, a reputation. No one introduces themselves in a place like this. Names are for outside. Here, you're that one with the teeth, or the loud one who stinks of onions. And the tavern doesn't care about your story, only about how much coin you've got and how long you'll last before your tongue, or your luck, runs out. Behind the bar, a bucket sloshes. The alewife pours something dark and uninviting into a pot. She doesn't use a ladle, just a broken mug. You're not sure if she's cooking or cleaning. Both activities look suspiciously similar. A cat appears from under a bench, threadbare and fierce. It leaps onto the table next to you, sniffs an abandoned plate and hisses at the man trying to shoo it away. No one dares remove it. The cat probably earns more respect than half the regulars here. Rats keep their distance when she's around, and that's more than can be said for most of the patrons. You notice a niche near the back wall, half hidden by a curtain of burlap. People slip in and out occasionally. Not many words are exchanged. Just a few coins, a few nods. Whatever business happens, there isn't meant for your eyes. You look away. Now the fiddler arrives. He's old, or maybe just weathered. A leather patch covers one eye, and his instrument looks like it survived a fire. Possibly caused the fire. He tunes it with jerky motions and begins to play. Not a noble tune or a church melody, but something rough, foot-stomping, almost lewd. It fits the room like a splinter fits a wound. People begin to hum. One man slams his mug in time. A couple starts to sway. The bench beneath you shifts with each beat. For a moment the air feels warmer. The noise unites. Even the shadows seem to pause. And that's when it hits you. The strangest part of it all. You're starting to like it here. The smoke no longer stings as much. The smell of meat grease and muddy boots starts to smell. Almost comforting. It's not clean, not safe, but it's honest. There's a kind of strange democracy in a tavern like this. Peasants, tradesmen, travellers, even someone with a feather in his cap and too many rings on his fingers. They all drink from the same chipped mugs. They all spill the same stew down their fronts. They all wake up tomorrow with the same headache. Just as you reach for your mug again, someone yells. A shriek of laughter, maybe. Or pain. You can't tell. Either way, nobody moves. It's just another night, and you're only getting started. You lift the mug again, swishing the ale gently. It's warmer now, not that it was ever cold. The flavour has settled, or maybe your standards have. Either way, you drink. Across the tavern, a man is pouring his third. You watch as he leans heavily on the bar, arm trembling slightly as he lifts his cup. His cloak is damp, stained with something that could be mud or worse. But he's grinning. Because here, he's safe. From what, you're not entirely sure. Your eyes flick toward the door. It's still open just a crack, letting in the occasional whip of cold night air. Outside, the street is quiet. Too quiet. Because no one with sense drinks water at night. Not in this town. In truth, no one with sense drinks water much at all. You've heard the stories. Filthy wells, dead animals floating in riverbanks, rain barrels filled with slime and rat droppings. Drinking water from the wrong place could end your life in less than a week, and you wouldn't even have time to curse it properly. That's why you're drinking ale. Not because it tastes good, but because it's boiled, because it's brewed with grain that someone somewhere pretended to check for mold, because the yeast, the fermentation, the alcohol, it kills the things you can't see, or at least enough of them. Everyone knows someone who drank from the wrong stream and didn't wake up the next morning. That's the quiet fear that sits in every man's belly here. No one talks about it. But it's there, just beneath the laughter. You take another sip. Medieval ale isn't like the stuff you're used to. It's weak, barely alcoholic, but it's thick, like a loaf of soggy bread in liquid form. They call it small beer in some places, made with leftover grain, brewed quickly, drunk fast. Children drink it. Pregnant women drink it. Your blacksmith drinks it with his morning onions. The stronger stuff, the heavy, hoppy, bitter ale that makes you forget your name, is more expensive. That's for saints' days, big weddings, or nights when someone loses a finger and thinks it's cause for celebration. But tonight, this place serves the common brew. You overhear the barkeep telling someone that last week's batch went bad. This one's better, she claims. Only a little mould. And no frogs this time. That gets a laugh. You wonder if it's a joke. There's a woman near the hearth ladling something from a clay jug into mugs. She's got a row of them set up, each with a different smear or crack. She doesn't rinse between pours. You're not surprised. Someone clinks their mug against yours and winks. His teeth are mostly gone. You smile politely and lift your drink. When in doubt, drink. That seems to be the only real rule. It's not just about thirst, of course. Ale keeps people from going mad. It soothes, it distracts, it numbs. In a world where plagues sweep through like wind and winters don't forgive, the tavern's cloudy ale is a kind of ritual, a shield against the randomness of a cruel world. You notice two boys near the door trading something wrapped in cloth. Bread, jerky. You can't tell. One of them bites into it and grimaces. The other laughs and hands him a swallow of ale to wash it down. Even they know. Outside, the rain starts up again. Light at first, then heavier. The door creaks with each gust. No one moves to close it. The ale flows and the truth settles in. In this age, water might quench your thirst, but it won't keep you alive. Ale will. The barkeep reaches under the counter and pulls out a jug, darker than the others, with a cork stopper. This one isn't for everyone. She pours a little into a heavy mug and slides it toward the man at the end of the bar, the one with a silver coin already waiting on the plank. You recognize the glint of privilege when you see it. That's the strong stuff. The kind you sip, not gulp. The kind that's been fermented longer, taxed higher, and mixed with secrets. You lean back, watching the room again. The ale isn't just a drink, it's a kind of glue. You see it binding groups together. Two masons from the quarry, still in their dusty boots, clink mugs over some private joke. A woman with cracked knuckles and a bloodied apron shares her bench with a boy half her age, both grinning over the same bowl of mush. Their stories blur at the edges, but the ale blurs them more. At the next table over, someone starts singing. Not well, but loud enough that everyone hears. A few others join in, slapping the table in time. You recognize none of the words. It's a drinking song about a pig, or a man who married one. It's hard to tell. And still, the ale flows. Not from taps. There are no glass bottles, no barrels lined in neat rows with branded logos. Ale in this place is kept in cracked pottery, wooden kegs sealed with pitch, or reused animal bladders tied with cord. The containers smell like everything else in the room: sweat, soot, and wet grain. You catch a faint hiss near your feet, a stream of liquid snakes across the floorboards. Someone's knocked over a mug, or worse. The liquid pools and disappears into the straw-covered earth, which is already so saturated it practically sighs with relief. Your bench shifts slightly. The man next to you groans and slumps forward. His head lands with a dull thud on the table. No one checks on him. He's not the first tonight, and probably not the last. That's the other truth about ale in medieval taverns. It's an escape hatch. Not everyone's here to drink for the taste. Some drink to forget the hunger waiting at home, others to warm their blood before they sleep in a freezing barn. A few just want to sing until they can't feel the weight of their own limbs. You glance back toward the bar. The barkeep is adding something to a fresh batch of ale. A twist of herb, maybe. Or a dried mushroom. You're not close enough to tell. But you've heard stories. In some places, ale is fortified. Not just with hops, which aren't common in every region, but with roots, spices, even poppy juice. A good mix can dull pain. A bad one can end the night early. Or permanently. But no one asks. No one watches too closely. Not here. Near the fire, the singing has turned to shouting. A man insists the pig in the song was real and belonged to his uncle. Others heckle him, laughing. Someone tosses a crust of bread. It hits the wall with a soft splat and slides down slowly. The cat watches it with contempt. You sip your ale again. It's nearly gone. The dregs at the bottom are thicker, grainy and sharp. You drink them anyway. The barkeep is already moving toward you, fresh mug in hand. You don't refuse. Because in a world where water brings sickness and tea is for nobles, you drink what everyone else drinks. And tonight, that means more ale. The bench creaks under your weight as you shift again, trying not to touch anything too directly. It's not that you're squeamish. You've already downed a mug of gritty ale. But there's something about the feel of the wood beneath you that's deeply unsettling. It's slick, sticky in some spots, powdery in others. And you're pretty sure the dark streak near your elbow isn't just spilled drink. You glance under the table. That's when you notice it properly. The floor. Not a floor, really. More like a living museum of everything that's ever been dropped, dribbled or expelled in this tavern since the last plague swept through. It's a mat of compressed straw, layered over dirt, sprinkled with bones, onion peels, fish spines, and what might be a boot heel, or a rat. Hard to tell. This isn't carelessness, it's tradition. Tavern floors weren't swept, they were topped up. That sour-smelling layer of straw is called rushes, and it's supposed to soak up the mess. Except they don't change it often. Sometimes not for months. Instead, they toss fresh rushes on top when it gets too sloshy, like adding new thatch to a leaking roof, without removing the old rotting mess beneath. You spot a puddle of something viscous near your foot. You move it. The man beside you coughs violently, then wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. A moment later he lets out a deep sigh and spits, right on the floor, like everyone else does. You understand now why the cat is always on the table. The benches too have their stories. Yours is worm-eaten, the legs uneven. One corner lifts off the ground if you shift too much, which means your mug threatens to slide off at any moment. Across from you, another bench leans against the wall for support, sagging in the middle like an old man's back. Someone has wedged a bit of cloth under one leg, likely a lost sleeve. There's no cutlery on your table, of course. No napkins, no plates really. Just a wooden bowl with the remains of something porridge-like and grey, crusted onto the side. You can tell someone scraped at it. With a fingernail, maybe. You try not to think about how many people have sat here before you, what illnesses they dragged in on their cloaks, what things they did with their hands before touching the same mug you're holding now. In the far corner, a man lifts one leg and scratches furiously at his calf. He rolls up the leg of his hose and examines something with a grunt. Lice, you realise. Maybe fleas. Definitely not a surprise. They live in the rushes too. You suddenly feel itchy. The barmaid walks past with a heavy bucket, sloshing something that smells faintly of wood ash and old cabbage. She throws it near the door without warning. It hits the rushes with a soggy thud and steams briefly before disappearing. No one flinches. You wonder if that was cleaning water or soup. No one checks. You lean forward and place your elbows on the table, then regret it instantly. The surface is smooth in the middle but tacky at the edges. You glance around for something to wipe your hands on. Your own sleeve will have to do. A small group of men near the hearth are talking about the rat again. One claims it bit him in his sleep 2 weeks ago. Another says it stole his bread. No one suggests killing it. It's become a kind of mascot. Or maybe they're just afraid they'd miss. A sharp whistle cuts through the air. Someone's dog has wandered in. It sniffs the floor enthusiastically, then lifts a leg against a table leg. The barmaid throws a wooden spoon at it. She misses. The dog trots off. The floor drinks everything. So do you. You shift again on the bench, but it groans in protest. And so do your knees. There's no cushion, of course. No backrest. Just raw wood polished by years of trousers, cloaks, and the occasional pair of bare thighs on market day. Your rear is already numb. But strangely, you're adapting. There's a rhythm to the discomfort here, a kind of acceptance. Everyone's dirty, everyone's sore, everyone stinks just a little bit, and no one minds. The tavern doesn't care about your dignity. A woman nearby lifts her skirt slightly, not for scandal, just to scratch at her ankle. She mutters something about those crawling devils in the hay. The man beside her offers her a pinch of dried mint to rub on the bites. She accepts it without a word. No shame, no thanks, just need and answer. The longer you sit, the more you notice the constant, quiet choreography of the tavern's underworld. Under the tables, between the benches, behind the bar, there's a movement of creatures sharing your evening. Fleas, lice, flies, and yes, the rats. Not swarms of them, just enough to remind you that this is their home too. One skitters past, nose twitching, tail curled like a question mark. It disappears behind the firewood pile and no one reacts. The barmaid doesn't even pause in wiping out a mug with the same cloth she used for the spilled ale earlier. In this place, hygiene is more hope than habit. You glance at the ceiling beams. Cobwebs drape down like festive garlands. In one corner, a spider the size of your thumb tucks itself deeper into its nest. Probably the oldest inhabitant here, maybe even the cleanest. Then there's the smell. Oh, the smell. It evolves over time. What began as smoke and meat and sour yeast has become something deeper, something living. A blend of damp wool, unwashed feet, fish grease, boiled roots, and the sharp sting of human breath. The tavern doesn't just smell, it exhales. There's something strangely comforting in it, though, like a stable, or a cave, or a cradle if you'd been born in a ditch. It's not pleasant, but it is consistent, predictable, familiar. A man across from you lifts his boot onto the bench and begins picking something from between his toes. His ale sloshes on the table, but he doesn't notice, or care. You notice. You look down at your own boots. The soles are caked in mud and tavern floor straw. You don't remember when you last cleaned them. Maybe you're becoming one of them. There's a commotion near the door. Someone slipped. You hear the scrape of a body against wet straw, followed by a groan and several hearty laughs. A few patrons lift their mugs in salute. The fallen man grins as he struggles up, his back now decorated with floor sludge and a wayward chicken feather. And yet he laughs. That's the strangest part. There's no shame here, no real embarrassment. Not in filth, not in smell, not in losing your footing or scratching your lice or drinking from a mug that's probably never been truly clean. The tavern expects it. The tavern is it. A man stomps his boot on the floor to get attention. He raises his mug and shouts something in garbled rhyme. The crowd laughs, slaps the table, and joins in with the chant, half in jest, half in reverence. It's not about the ale, it's about being here, being human, being disgusting together, and somehow you feel welcomed. You hear her before you see her. A low voice slicing through the din, not yelling, just firm, used to being heard above clamour. The barmaid. Again. But this time she's on the warpath, storming past your table with her apron hiked up and her elbow aimed like a weapon. Someone's been too slow to pay. The man, a gangly weaver with a chin full of grease and regret, tries to laugh it off. Bad choice. She doesn't slap him. She doesn't need to. She plants one flour-dusted fist on her hip and raises an eyebrow so sharp it could cleave a ham. He coughs up 2 copper coins immediately. That's the hierarchy here. The tavern keeper may hold the ledger. But the barmaid, she holds the room. You watch her as she moves, efficient, brutal, unflinching. Her arms are thick from hauling buckets and barrels, her hands red from boiling water that only half sanitizes the mugs. Her face is lined, not with age, but with memory. You can tell she's seen everything in this room twice, and nothing shocks her anymore. She drops by your table and swipes your mug mid-sip. Yours had a dead fly in it, she mutters. This one's got a smaller one. She slaps down a replacement before you can even thank her. Hospitality, medieval style. Then she's gone again, barking at a boy by the hearth to stop picking his scabs and a man near the door to stop urinating in the fireplace. That last one draws a round of laughter, including from the offender himself. He zips up, well, lifts cloth, more accurately, and winks at her. She throws a spoon. It hits him square in the forehead. You're beginning to understand why no one messes with her. Back near the bar, she leans into a side room and bellows something that sounds like boil it longer this time. You hear a voice from inside shout back, "It is boiling!" followed by a loud clang. That's the kitchen, and you don't want to know what's in it. Still, curiosity gets the better of you. You rise from your seat and edge toward the counter. From this angle you can peek just enough to see through the smoke-drenched curtain hanging beside the bar. And there it is, the kitchen. A single pot balanced over a weak fire, a mound of turnips, some soft, a butchered rabbit, or maybe 2. A woman hunched over a chopping board that is clearly also a breadboard, a meat board, and probably the place where someone once set a chamber pot in a hurry. A stack of wooden bowls glistens in the dim light, not with polish, but with a layer of residue from meals long past. Someone is stirring the pot with a stick that looks like it was snapped off a fence. There's a distinct lack of anything you'd call seasoning. You catch a whiff of the stew and immediately regret it. Something vaguely animal. Maybe mutton, maybe squirrel, maybe a mystery better left unsolved. And yet, people are eating it. The barmaid emerges again, holding 2 steaming bowls. She sets them in front of 2 men who dig in instantly, blowing on, their spoons and slurping with glee. One pulls out something stringy and chews it slowly, clearly debating whether it's sinew or root. He swallows anyway. This is what passes for dinner. You sit back down, slightly shaken by what you saw in the kitchen, or rather what you couldn't unsee. The stew, now circulating among tables, smells less like food and more like something you'd expect to scrub off your boots. Still, everyone's eating. The man next to you leans over and grins. His teeth are imaginative. "Good batch tonight," he says, jabbing at his bowl with a 2-pronged twig, less crunchy than last week. You ask what's in it. He shrugs. Whatever she could catch, or scrape, or trade for. He takes another bite and chews with slow determination. Once had one with eel. That was a good night. Across the room, someone pulls a long grey strand from their bowl. It dangles, wiggles slightly. Might be a boiled root. Might be a boiled tail. The diner snorts, flings it behind him, and keeps going. You look down at your own bowl. The surface is a greasy shimmer, bobbing with what may be barley, maybe onion. A chunk of meat floats near the rim, fur still clinging to one edge. You decide to aim for the bread instead. The bread is harder than the bench you're sitting on. No one seems bothered. Because food is food, and taverns feed more than the body. They feed routine, fellowship, familiarity. You've heard of some taverns reusing the same stew pot for days, weeks even. New ingredients go in, leftovers remain. The broth grows deeper, murkier, stronger, like time in liquid form. The barmaid calls it ever stew. You suspect that's meant to sound appealing, but there are worse alternatives. In lean seasons, you'd be lucky to get animal parts most would throw away. Brain, liver, stomach. Boiled bones with the marrow sucked dry. Some taverns ground dried nettle and rye into something called pottage, a paste-like mixture that sticks to your ribs and also to your fingernails. You look at your spoon again, hoping it's clean. Then remember, no one here uses spoons, just fingers, maybe knives, maybe both. A group of men is arguing now about who gets the heel of bread. It's not even a full slice, just a hardened chunk that someone probably sat on earlier, but it's coveted. The barmaid throws it at the loudest of them. He catches it mid-air and holds it aloft like a prize. Food fight? Someone jokes. No one laughs. You turn back to your own bowl. It's not good, but it's hot. And hot goes a long way on a damp, lice-ridden evening. You scoop a bite of barley, chew slowly, and try not to think about what else might be in it. Whatever it was, it's dead now, probably boiled into submission. You try not to make eye contact with the woman stirring the pot behind the bar. She's eyeing a jar of something murky and fermented. Pickled onions, preserved eggs, something with a claw. She unscrews the lid. The smell reaches you before the lid is fully off. The man next to you coughs into his sleeve and mutters, "Not again." Even the cat leaves the table. The barmaid laughs, and you take another bite, because somehow the stew tastes better when you stop asking questions. The noise has changed. It's no longer just chatter and coughing and the occasional slurp of stew. It's sharper now, a sharper kind of tension. You hear the clack of something hard on wood, then again, then faster. You turn and see them. 3 men hunched over a narrow table, one of them shaking a pair of dice between his cupped hands. He slams them down. They roll. One man cheers, another curses and slams his mug. Dice games. They're as old as taverns themselves. Simple, portable, and often dangerous. No one's playing for fun. They're playing for coin, bread, shoes, dignity. And in a place like this, those things are worth more than life itself. You lean back slightly, observing from a safe distance. The man on the left is missing 2 fingers. His sleeve hangs loose where the fabric was never stitched closed. The man in the centre wears a leather cap pulled low, eyes darting constantly, hands too quick. A cheat. Possibly. Then again, so is everyone. The third man is a mountain. Broad shoulders, thick neck, a nose that's been broken more times than his vows. He isn't smiling. Coins clatter onto the table. The game resumes. You hear shouts of hazard and throw again. The rules are as murky as the ale and just as changeable. All it takes is one good or bad roll, and someone's night will end in joy or violence. Near the fire, a different group plays a simpler game. Knucklebones. They toss animal bones into a shallow bowl and call out predictions. You recognise one of the pieces as a sheep's ankle, maybe from tonight's stew. A woman nearby watches the dice game with interest, not because she's betting, but because she's watching them. You notice how her eyes follow the hand with the coins, not the dice. She knows who's hiding what, who's lying, who's already drunk too much to notice when his pouch goes missing. Someone wins a round. The table erupts in grunts and complaints. The winner scoops up the coins, triumphant for now. The loser glares. His knuckles are white, his jaw clenched. The barmaid calls out, "No blood before the candles go out." It's not a joke. You take a moment to look around the room. Every corner holds a game of some kind. Arm wrestling, mug sliding, a boy guessing which hand holds the pebble, a drinking challenge involving pickled eggs, each one with its own stakes. Gambling isn't outlawed here, it's encouraged. It keeps people entertained, keeps coins circulating, keeps tempers manageable, until they're not. The tavern thrives on risk. You don't come here to win, you come here to escape. A man to your right offers to teach you a game called Fox and Hens. You politely decline. He shrugs and moves on, already pulling a friend into it. The rules change mid-round. No one seems to mind. A wooden mug thumps onto your table. Someone just lost a bet and had to buy you a drink. You nod in thanks. They nod back solemnly, like it's a sacred rite. Maybe it is. You sip. It's worse than the last one. The dice slam down again. This time no one laughs. The man in the leather cap leans in, voice low. That was a 7. The mountain across from him shakes his head slowly, lip curling. No, that was 5 and 2, and you called 6. It's a small difference, a single pip. But in this room, that pip might as well be a knife. The tension sharpens. The other players sit back, not out of fear, yet, but out of habit. They know this look, the careful unblinking, the fingers curling around the rim of a mug, the hand slowly dropping beneath the table. The barmaid hasn't moved. But her eyes are fixed on them now. "Do it outside," she mutters to no one in particular. "I just wiped that table." You brace, half expecting a chair to fly. But then the leather-capped man raises his palms, grinning through crooked teeth. All right, roll again." He throws the dice toward the big man with exaggerated flair, as if to say, "We're just playing." The big man stares at the dice for a long time before slowly reaching for them. Crisis averted. For now. This is the game within the game. It's not just luck or coin, it's performance. Bluffing, reading, testing boundaries, and everyone in the tavern knows it, even those not playing or watching, betting silently in their heads, not on the dice, but on the outcome. A man to your left chuckles. "Last week," he whispers, "someone threw a double 6 and got thrown out the window." You blink. "Not because he cheated," the man adds, tearing off a strip of bread with his teeth. "Because he won." You glance back at the game. The big man is rolling again. This time it's a good result, apparently. He lets out a grunt of approval. Coins clink. Everyone relaxes, just in time for someone to shriek near the hearth. A younger man, barely out of his teens, is flailing his arms and pointing. "He took it! He took my purse!" Half the room groans. The accused, a wiry boy with straw in his hair and a face too innocent to be trusted, holds up his hands. "Didn't touch a thing." You expect the tavern keeper to intervene, or the barmaid. But no one moves, because theft, like everything else here, follows its own rules. The older patrons look away, uninterested. One mutters, "You dropped it. Fool's fault." Another whispers, "Shouldn't have worn a belt in this place anyway." Eventually the boy gives up. He slumps down, bitter, checking the straw-covered floor with one hand. His purse is gone. It's part of the tavern now, just like the knife wedged into the back beam, or the lost shoe dangling from the rafters, or the handful of teeth embedded in the cracks of the dice table. You sip again. This place eats fortunes and forgets them. A few stools away, another game begins. Quieter this time. No shouting. Just a few nods, a few shared looks, and the sound of fingernails drumming on wood. You start to notice the same faces orbiting these games, the ones who never seem to win or lose too much, who stay just lucky enough to keep drinking, just unlucky enough to avoid notice. Professionals maybe, or ghosts in flesh. You wonder how many of them even have homes, or names, or plans to leave this tavern tonight. The dice rattle once more. The stakes have nothing to do with money anymore. The barmaid claps her hands once sharp as flint. "Stew's done," she calls, though it's more a warning than an announcement. A few patrons stir, some shuffle forward, bowls in hand. Others remain slouched over their drinks, unmoved by the promise of second helpings. You stay put. You've already rolled the dice on dinner once tonight. Instead, your eyes drift toward a nearby table where a man and woman are poking suspiciously at their meal. They're dissecting it like scholars, sniffing, pulling pieces apart, tapping one odd-looking bit against the bowl to see if it makes a sound. It does. A hollow one. The man shrugs and eats it anyway. But it's not just the stew that's questionable. A moment later, someone slams their spoon down and leans back. "There's hair in this," he says loudly. The barmaid doesn't even look up. Be glad it's not fur. The room erupts in laughter, or coughing. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. You, however, are suddenly very aware of the half-eaten chunk in your bowl. You nudge it with your finger and feel a rubbery resistance. Muscle, maybe, or offal, or something unclassified. Still, no one is stopping. The truth is, no one came to this tavern expecting a feast. They came for warmth, for drink, for a bit of noise and the dim illusion that they're somewhere safer than the cold streets outside. The food? That's just a bonus, or a dare. You overhear a man say, "Remember the one with the pigeon?" His friend nods gravely. "And the claws." They both shudder. Tonight's stew, by comparison, is relatively tame, and then someone, perhaps emboldened by ale or madness, raises his bowl high and declares, "To the chef!" A smattering of cheers follows, mostly ironic, but somewhere in the middle of it all you spot the cook. She's peering through the curtain, apron dusted in flour, hair tied with twine. She lifts her chin like a soldier preparing for battle. Then she disappears into the back again, probably to stir whatever's next. You glance back at the bowl. It still steams faintly. The smell is somehow getting worse as it cools. A sour-sweet tang, like boiled onions left out too long. You imagine the pot in the kitchen again, unchanged, eternal, growing thicker by the day. Every meal a reincarnation of the last. A man across from you suddenly coughs mid-bite and spits something out. He examines it with a grimace. A tooth. "Not mine," he says brightly and keeps eating. Someone nearby mutters, "Could have been worse. Could have been a button." More laughter. This, you realise, is what binds them all. Not the ale, not the games, but the absurdity of it all. The shared, quiet understanding that life is grim, survival is absurd, and stew should never, ever crunch. Yet still, spoons clink, bread is broken, mugs refill. In a world where famine is a season and rot is a daily companion, even a half-honest stew is a treasure, especially when it's hot, especially when it's not moving. You dip your spoon again, half closing your eyes, and pretend it's just barley. A sudden thud startles you. Someone's bowl has fallen to the floor, knocked by a twitch of the elbow, or perhaps surrendered willingly. The contents spill into the straw rushes below, immediately soaking in like the floor itself is hungry. A few patrons glance over. One mutters, "Should have fed it to the dog first." The barmaid doesn't flinch. She walks past, drops a new bowl in front of the offender without a word, and keeps going. It's the same stew, possibly the same bowl, maybe even the same spoon now wiped once on her apron. You begin to understand why people here keep drinking. The ale isn't just for thirst, it's a palate cleanser, a confidence booster, a way to blur the question marks floating in every bowl and mug. And most of all, it's something familiar in a place where meat changes identity mid-chew. You glance up just in time to see a man bite into a chunk of something solid, then stop. His brow furrows. He chews slowly, then swallows, nodding once as if settling a private debate. Was definitely hoof, he says quietly to himself. 2 seats over, a woman picks something green from her stew, eyes it, then tucks it behind her ear. Lavender, she says smiling, for luck. Whether it was meant to be in the pot or fell in from her hair earlier, no one knows. This is the stew's strange power. It invites personalisation. A splash of ale, a pinch of ash, a bread crust stolen from another table. Everyone adjusts it. Everyone adapts, because no matter what's in it, you eat it. Not because you want to, but because you don't have a better option. And there's a kind of equality in that. You notice it now. There's no difference in bowls. No finer stew for the merchant or noble's messenger in the back. No silver cutlery hidden for the favoured guest. Everyone eats from the same pot. Everyone fishes through the same uncertain murk. That man with the red scarf owns half the tannery. He just sucked marrow from a bone like a street dog. That woman with the sharp jaw and laced-up boots, she just picked her teeth with a chicken rib and tucked it into her belt for later. Maybe as a charm, maybe as a snack. And you? You're starting to stir the stew with something like comfort. Because in a strange way, it's become yours too. The taste doesn't get better, you just care less. A man in the corner slaps his belly. Still warm, he announces. That's all I ask. Another lifts his mug. To whatever we just ate, a third adds, and to not finding it again in the morning. That gets a few groans and a chuckle. But the truth lingers underneath it all. This isn't a joke. Not really. In this world, dinner is a gamble. A stew is an offering. And if it doesn't make you sick, it's a good night. You push your bowl away gently, stomach turning just enough to remind you you're alive. Then reach for your mug. Because ale at least never lies about what it is. The first notes come soft. A high, trembling string dragged across something too dry, too tight. The sound wavers in the smoky air, half melody, half warning. Heads turn, not out of admiration, but because they know what's coming. The fiddler has arrived. He always comes late, always emerges from somewhere unseen, like a barn cat no one remembers feeding. Tonight, he appears from behind the curtain near the barrels, hunched over, face obscured beneath a battered hood. His boots are mismatched, one laced with string, the other patched with what looks like cured leather or possibly dried intestine. His eyes gleam. Just one of them, really. The other is white and milky, clouded by time or misfortune. The fiddle itself is a relic, scuffed, warped, strung with horsehair, or at least that's the hope. You hear whispers that one of the strings came from a goat, another from a woman's hair who owed him coin. Probably a lie. But in this place, even lies have weight. He plants himself near the hearth and begins to play in earnest. It's not sweet music, not the kind you'd hear at a noble's wedding or in a church nave. This is rough tavern music, built from repetition and tension, tuned by smoke and spilled ale. It loops and limps and jerks around corners like a 3-legged dog, but it moves, and the tavern moves with it. A man at the dice table slaps his thigh in time. A woman hums under her breath, head bobbing. Even the barmaid starts to sway as she wipes a table with a rag that's cleaning nothing. You feel it too, this shift in air, this shared momentum, the ale, the smoke, the stew. It all blurs together, and the fiddler becomes the thread holding it. The room sharpens around him, not quiet, never quiet, but more focused. Then come the lyrics, not from the fiddler. His mouth stays closed, but others start singing the tune they know by heart. Old words, nonsense words, something about a black pig and a barley field. You catch phrases like, "Turn the barrel twice," and "Don't kiss the cobbler's wife." Ridiculous. And yet, sung with reverence. The music wins tighter. One man rises to dance, or possibly just loses his balance. Either way, he begins stomping. It's not rhythmic, but it's loud. Someone joins him, then another. You realize you're tapping your own foot, involuntarily. This is the spell of the fiddler. You look at him again, his fingers fly. Fast, too fast for the condition of his strings. You swear one of them snaps, but the sound doesn't stop. Is it a trick, an illusion? Or has he just learned to fake it well enough that no one dares question? There's a bowl near his foot. Someone tosses in a coin, not because he asked, but because the room demands it. Every tavern needs a soundtrack, and tonight, this is yours. The tune shifts, darker now, lower, and so does the mood. The dancers slow, the drinkers pause, because they know this song too. The one played after a bad harvest, after a hanging, after a long, cold silence from someone who promised to return. The fiddler doesn't speak. He never does. He lets the strings do the mourning. The notes hang in the air like wood smoke, thick, reluctant to rise. One low string growls, another weeps. This isn't music for joy. It's music for remembering. The crowd quiets. Even the most ale-soaked men seem to grow still, shoulders sinking, mugs paused mid-air. The barmaid rests her elbow on the counter and stares, not at him, but through him. You wonder what she's seeing. A brother? A child? A past that tastes like cold rain and unsent letters? The fire spits. The tune drags on. You think of the stories that have soaked into this place. Lost sons, drowned daughters, crops that failed, wives that ran off, husbands that never came back from the market or the war or the woods. In this tavern no one needs to say the words, they just hum them. The fiddler's bow slows, then rises into a long trembling stroke, almost like breath leaving a body. One more note, then silence. Not full silence, of course. Someone coughs, the fire shifts, a bench creaks, but in tavern terms it's quiet, and then a single coin drops into the bowl at the fiddler's feet. The child's coin, small, worn smooth. You don't see who tossed it, but it lands with a sound sharper than the music that came before it. The fiddler nods once, then begins to play again. Lighter this time, a dancing tune, not to forget but to balance, because that's how tavern music works. It spirals between grief and grin. It doesn't hide sorrow. It just refuses to let sorrow have the last word. The feet start moving again. This time more playfully. A slap of boots, a clap of hands. Someone whistles. The woman with the lavender in her hair spins in a slow, ridiculous circle. Her laughter starts a wave of it across the room. Even the barmaid cracks a smile. Just briefly. You notice the fiddler's face now. Pale, drawn tight like wet parchment, but his eyes, both the sharp one and the clouded one, gleam in rhythm. Not joy exactly, but something close. Satisfaction, maybe. Or mischief. Or simply the knowledge that he owns the night for as long as he keeps playing. You reach for your mug again. It's nearly empty, but the last few sips taste warmer now. The music hums through the floorboards. And in this moment, with rats underfoot and steam rising from questionable stew, you feel oddly alive. Not clean, not proud, but present. That's what music does here. It doesn't distract you from the grime. It makes you dance in it. As the music fades into a gentle hum, talk begins again. Not louder, but sharper. You hear it everywhere now. Over by the door, two men huddle close, heads bent low, muttering in a rhythm that doesn't match the merriment. Near the fire, 3 older women speak in hushed tones, casting glances toward the stairwell, toward the barkeep, toward you. Taverns, you realise, don't just serve stew and ale. They serve secrets. Some are light, tossed around like bones in a dogfight. Gossip about whose cow gave sour milk, whose boots walked out of the stable while their owner was asleep. But others are heavier, too heavy to say aloud in the daylight. A traveller near your table leans in to speak to no one in particular. His voice is smooth, words honeyed. Merchant passed through yesterday, claimed the Duke's men are headed north, burning as they go. He sips. Not that they'd bother with this place. Unless someone's hiding something, the sentence hangs there. A woman across from him stiffens. No one replies. In the back, a man's voice rises above the others. You want to hear truth? Truth is, the baker's boy saw the reeve take coin from a stranger last week, coin he didn't report. He grins, toothless. That coin didn't smell like English silver. Another man slams his mug down. You'll get us whipped for that kind of talk. But the grinning man shrugs. They'll have to find me first. It's not just rumour anymore, it's risk. Talking like this, even here, even now, can get a man jailed, or worse. And yet the words flow, unbottled by ale and need. Because in the tavern people forget to be careful. The hearth crackles. A dog barks in its sleep. Outside, wind scrapes against the shutter. Then you hear it. A name. Spoken quietly, but clearly. A name you recognise from town. A name linked to something that wasn't supposed to be public. You glance toward the speaker. A thin man in a patched coat, eyes darting. He leans closer to his companion. They say she's been seen near the abbey at night, cloak over her head, talking to them. The listener's face pales. Someone coughs, loudly. The thin man goes silent. His hand slides slowly across the table to cover his mug. He doesn't drink again for a long while. This is the rhythm now. Not dice, not song, but information. Trading words like coin, passing truths wrapped in riddles. Some spoken to test the air, some to warn, some to betray. You realise now, this tavern is a ledger, a living one. Not of debts and coin, but of whispered names, glances, and things never written down. The walls have heard more than any priest. The tables have soaked up more confessions than any chapel bench. And the barkeep, he hears everything, doesn't write a word. But nothing leaves this tavern that he doesn't already know. A man next to you leans in and whispers, "Mind what you say, friend. Talk is louder than fists in this place." You nod slowly, because here, words are weapons, and some of them have already been drawn. You start to notice it now, how the conversations ebb and flow like tides, rising to test the edges of what's safe before pulling back under a wave of laughter or a noisy slurp of ale. The room carries layers, not just smoke and stew and music, but meaning. Every quiet moment feels loaded, every loud one a disguise. A woman near the stairs leans in to speak with the barmaid, voice nearly inaudible. She nods toward a man in the far corner, one of the only patrons not drinking. Clean-shaven, boots still polished, eyes too alert. He watches but never smiles, never blinks. The barmaid says nothing, but her rag stills in her hand. You don't ask. You shouldn't ask. That's the first rule of tavern gossip. Never chase a thread unless you're ready to follow it into the dark. A whisper passes near you. They say the reeve's been selling grain out the back door while folks starve in the eastern quarter. Another voice snaps back. Shut your mouth. There's ears in these beams. And they're not wrong. You begin to suspect the walls themselves are listening, that every rafter, every nail in the floor holds a story that could get someone flogged, or worse. The fireplace has heard treason. The barrels have cradled betrayal. And the man sweeping by the hearth? He may be missing half a foot, but his ears work just fine. Still, the tongues don't stop wagging, because gossip in a medieval tavern is more than a pastime. It's currency. In a world without newspapers, letters most can't read, and news that travels slower than a lame mule, this is the wire. You learn who's been arrested, who's fled, who's suddenly rich, who isn't sleeping in their own bed, who might not wake up in one tomorrow. But there's another side to it, the confessional side. A man at your table, quiet for most of the night, suddenly leans toward you. "I left my wife last week," he says softly, breath hot with ale. "Took the cow, left the child, don't know why." He shakes his head. "Just walked." He says it like it's nothing, like you're the edge of a cliff and he just needed to throw the thought off it. Before you can respond, he stands and wanders off toward the bar, muttering to himself. You sit back, unsure whether to feel honoured or alarmed. A woman you hadn't noticed before, middle-aged, dressed in faded wool, sits by the window murmuring to no one. A lullaby, maybe, or a prayer, you can't tell. Her eyes flick between the patrons like she's counting them. Someone clears their throat beside you. Her husband never came back from market last year. She's been here every night since. Says she'll see him walk in if she waits long enough. You look at her again. The candle near her is almost spent. The barmaid walks by and places a small cup beside her without a word. This place remembers everything, even what most people try to forget. There's laughter. Again at the far table, but it's thinner now, nervous. You hear a tankard drop, a muttered curse. You notice fewer people are speaking. The gossip tide has gone out. It always does. Until the next rumour floats in with the next traveller, or until someone says the wrong thing too loud. You lean back, sip your ale, and stare at the rafters, because in this room, even the ceiling has secrets. It's late now. Not that anyone has a clock, but you feel it in your bones. The air has shifted. The laughter's grown looser, the story's more repetitive, and the mug's harder to lift without spilling. The fire's dimmed, burning more smoke than flame. Even the cat has curled up near the ashes, ears twitching in time with snoring. And that's when you hear it, a rhythmic creak from upstairs. Not the kind that comes from settling wood or shifting wind. No, this is deliberate, repeating, predictable. Creak, pause, creak. You glance toward the stairwell, a narrow passage lit by a single rushlight, barely enough to guide a drunk with a paid-for room, or a rented one. The barmaid walks past, unfazed. She notices your glance and smirks. "If it's creaking, someone paid extra," she says with a shrug. "Let them have their sins while the roof still holds." You don't ask what that means. The upstairs rooms in a medieval tavern are a curious thing. They aren't inns. They're not meant for comfort or quiet or even a full night's rest. They're places to disappear for a while, for trade, for business, for warmth, or for something altogether less noble. Sometimes it's a travelling merchant needing a straw bed and a lockable door. Sometimes it's a blacksmith and his debts. And sometimes it's just two people agreeing to forget the world for the price of a coin and an unlocked latch. You hear a giggle now, light, breathy, but edged with weariness. Another creak. The man near the hearth snorts. New lad upstairs thinks no one knows he's not married to her. The woman across from him, sipping something stronger than ale, raises an eyebrow. Maybe she's not charging him. Ever think of that? He barks a laugh and raises his mug. If so, he's the only one. But the barmaid walks by again and mutters, "Mind your tone. She's got a brother who listens better than you do." The laughter dies quickly. You sip your ale, eyes still on the stairwell. Someone descends slowly, trying not to be seen. A man with boots in hand and a flush on his face. He avoids every gaze, finds his seat again, and downs the rest of his drink in a single gulp. No one teases him, because upstairs, for all its jokes and whispers, is also a space of necessity. When homes are cold and marriages colder, and coin short, those rooms offer choices where life offers none. For some, it's a place of agency. For others, a last resort. The tavern doesn't judge, it doesn't ask, and the patrons, they forget on purpose. There's a story from a table behind you. A woman speaks low. Once saw the Reeve's wife upstairs. Came in with a hood, left with a bruise. Her voice doesn't shake, but her hand tightens on her cup. Her friend says nothing, just drinks. The fiddler starts playing again, softly now, something slower, gentle, like a lullaby for the guilty, or the lonely. The upstairs creaking stops. You realise half the room has gone, quiet, listening not to the song, but to the absence of sound. Because in a tavern like this, even silence says something. Another set of footsteps climbs the stairs. These ones are slower, heavier. Not the eager skip of young lust, nor the soft shuffle of someone trying to leave unnoticed. No, this sounds like someone resigned. Someone who knows exactly what waits above and has long since stopped imagining anything better. The barmaid doesn't glance up. She just refills another mug. By now you've pieced it together. The stairway isn't just a path to beds. It's a revolving door of stories no one tells in daylight. Up there, in those draughty, splintered rooms, people barter warmth for silence, bodies for bread, memory for a place to sleep. Not always with bitterness, sometimes with boredom, sometimes even with something resembling affection, but never with illusions. A man at the next table leans forward. Heard one of them upstairs last week asked for her payment in eggs. Eggs! He laughs into his drink and his companions follow, though their laughter comes too quick, too hard. The barmaid passes by again. She's got 2 sisters, she says flatly. You laughing at them too? The laughter dries up. One of them clears his throat. Another looks away. You sip your drink and say nothing, because everyone here knows someone who's been up those stairs. A daughter, a neighbour, a friend. Or maybe they've been there themselves. Not every tavern offers rooms, but the ones that do, they offer. Not force, not lure, just offer. And when winter bites and husbands vanish and grain spoils, people make choices, or rather, they pick from what's left. You hear someone descending now. Is not the same man as before. This one is older. He stops on the last step, adjusting his belt, rubbing his eyes like he just awoke from a nap he didn't plan. He looks round the room, searching for something. Maybe a face, maybe his mug. Then he sits alone, staring at the table. No one joins him. No one mocks him either. There's a kind of unwritten rule here. What happens upstairs stays in the creaking wood and cracked plaster. The tavern is many things. Chaotic, filthy, cruel. But it protects its own codes. You notice now that the corner near the stairs has a small pile of boots and cloaks. Left quietly. No one dares steal from it. Even thieves here know better. A different woman now ascends. She carries a small pouch of coins and walks with a straight back. You watch her go, wondering what she leaves behind on the ground floor and what she hopes to find above. A man near you murmurs, "She's saving up for a stall, wants to sell soap come spring." You nod, as if that explains everything. And it does. Because upstairs isn't just about sin. Sometimes it's about strategy. The fiddler's tune drifts higher now, his bow drawing notes that echo off the beams like thoughts unspoken. The fire crackles low. Someone snores beneath the table. The tavern begins its long slide into night, and above you, beyond the creaking floorboards, another story begins. No one will write it down, but everyone will remember. The candle near your elbow is sputtering now, its wick drowning in its own wax. The light in the tavern has shifted, less golden, more grey. You can barely make out faces across the room. Just shapes hunched over mugs, blurred outlines of bodies folded into benches, half asleep or half gone. Then the door creaks open. Not all the way, just enough to let in a slap of cold air, the kind that makes your spine twitch, and behind it, a noise you've come to dread. Boots, heavy ones, sharp heel, steady rhythm, not drunk, not tired, too steady. The night watch. You watch the barmaid glance up, just once, then go back to rinsing a cup with a rag that's been dirty since noon. She doesn't hurry. That's the rule. If you act guilty, they notice. 2 men enter, not armoured but uniformed in the way their coats match, in the way they don't laugh, in the way their eyes cut the room in half with just a glance. They don't shout. They don't need to. Everyone straightens just slightly. Conversations don't stop, they just drop a few decibels. The dice game ends with an awkward scrape of wood. The fiddler lowers his bow. A man sleeping beneath a bench pretends to snore. The first watchman walks toward the bar. The second stands near the door, arms folded, blocking it. You know how this goes. They're not here to arrest anyone. Not right now. They're here to be seen, to remind everyone that after curfew this isn't just a warm room full of stories and stew. It's a room full of potential offenders. The barkeep greets them like old friends, without warmth, but with practiced familiarity. Still working, he asks, as if surprised to see them. Still watching, the taller one replies. He gets a mug, doesn't pay. The one at the door doesn't move, but you see his eyes fix on the dice table, then on the woman near the window, then on you. A long look. You raise your mug in a lazy toast like you don't notice, like you're too far into the ale to remember what day it is. He doesn't respond, but he looks away. You exhale. The tavern has rules, but they're not written anywhere, and the biggest rule is, never give the night watch a reason. Not a real one, not one they can name. They'll find one anyway if they feel like it. The man at the bar finishes his mug in 2 long gulps, wipes his mouth with his sleeve, and drops the empty on the counter. Keep it quiet tonight, he says without looking up. The barkeep nods once. Depends who walks in. No one laughs. The watchmen turn and leave. The door groans behind them. Silence. Then, slowly, like a weight lifted, the room exhales. Not relief, just release. You realise your hand has been gripping your mug too tightly. You set it down. Your fingers leave a mark on the clay. Someone near the hearth mutters, "They're always worse near market days." Another replies, "More people to see you fall." A woman tosses another log into the fire, sparks leap, then settle. The fiddler resumes his tune, softer now, almost apologetic. And the tavern begins again, because the night isn't over, and the rules have simply shifted. You glance toward the door long after it's closed, half expecting it to creak open again. The night watch always leaves a trail behind them, an invisible residue that lingers in the air like stale smoke. Everyone talks again, eventually, but softer, slower, like their words need to tiptoe for a while. Someone leans over and whispers, "You know they weren't here for drink." You nod slowly, because everyone knows. They weren't here to warm their hands or taste bad ale. They were here to see who flinched, who sat too still, who had fresh bruises, who wasn't supposed to be here at all. They were watching faces. A boy by the back wall, no more than 15, tries to sneak out, shoulders hunched, hood drawn. The barmaid stops him gently with one hand. "Not yet," she says. He pauses, confused. "I'm not." "I know, but wait until they're farther off." She hands him a crust of bread. "Eat. Move when the cat does." You glance down. Sure enough, the cat is still curled by the hearth, tail twitching once in her sleep. You begin to wonder how many have learned to follow her pace, her instincts, just to survive another evening. The boy nods, mouth full of bread, and sinks into the shadows again. The tavern teaches its own kind of wisdom. The dice come out again cautiously. Just one man at first, then two. They roll without speaking, a silent agreement to resume the ritual. Across the room, someone starts humming. Not a song, just a rhythm. Maybe to soothe themselves. Maybe to prove the room belongs to them, not to the men in black cloaks who come and go. The barmaid stands near the stairwell now, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. You follow her gaze to a man seated alone at a table near the rear door. You hadn't noticed him arrive. He's dressed simply, hood still up, mug untouched. His boots are dry. Too dry for the weather outside. Not from here. The barmaid doesn't approach him. She doesn't need to. She simply watches. Because she knows who belongs, who pretends to, and who might be here to listen more than drink. Another rule of the tavern: not all threats wear a uniform. A few patrons glance at the stranger and quickly look away. One lifts a mug in greeting. It's not returned. The fiddler doesn't stop playing, but he changes the tune. Something sharper, less comforting. The rhythm staggers a bit, like warning bells with strings. You start to wonder whether this man will stay the night, or whether someone will make sure he doesn't. The barmaid finally moves, but not toward him. She goes behind the bar, takes down a clay jug you haven't seen her touch all evening, pours something dark and still, not ale. She walks it over to an older man dozing by the hearth, sets it gently beside him. No one else gets that jug. You see, in the tavern, everyone is watched. But not everyone is seen. The door rattles slightly in the wind. The cat lifts her head, ears perked. The boy with the bread tenses. The barmaid notices. "Wait," she says softly, almost too soft to hear. And so, the whole room does, waiting. For the creak of boots that might return, for the wind to shift, for the night to end, or to deepen. Because this isn't just a place to drink. It's a place where silence is spoken fluently, and you've just learned the first few words. The air's turned thick again, not from smoke this time, but from something quieter, a kind of held breath. The stranger near the rear door hasn't moved. The boy by the wall hasn't either. The cat, wide-eyed now, stares at nothing in particular. You wonder if it's listening to things even the fiddler can't hear. And then the door opens a second time. But it's not the watch. It's a woman. She enters quickly, cloak damp from the rain, boots caked in thin layers of mud. Her eyes scan the room with a kind of casual alertness, familiar but not friendly. She's not here for laughter, or stew, or even gossip. She moves with purpose, nods once at the barkeep, and disappears behind the curtain near the rear pantry. No one comments, which tells you everything. You glance around. A few patrons subtly shift their positions. One man scratches at his beard and angles his chair just slightly, so his back is closer to the wall. Another man near you removes his hat, wipes the brim, and places it face down on the table. You don't understand the full language, but you catch the grammar. That wasn't just any woman. That was the alewife, not the barmaid, not the cook, not the innkeeper's wife, but the woman who actually owns the brewing, and possibly the building. She doesn't pour drinks or scrub tables. She brews. She barters. She makes deals that rarely get written down. She may not speak much, but her presence rings out louder than a slammed mug. And tonight she's come in from the outskirts, probably from the brewing barn behind the village fence, where the barley boils and the yeast floats like ghosts. Alewives are different from barmaids. They don't serve, they supply. They're part chemist, part witch, part merchant, and all spine. And while you were sipping cloudy ale earlier, she was likely preparing the next batch, stirring vats, checking temperatures by hand, tossing in herbs that aren't listed on any scroll because no one writes what really goes in. The fiddler, noticing her arrival, shifts his song again, not lively, Not solemn, balanced, a nod. You sip your ale slowly, unsure now what's in it. Before tonight you assumed beer was just beer. But here, each mug is a recipe, and each recipe is a guarded inheritance. Alewives weren't just brewers. In many towns they were feared, accused of watering down ale, or, if the townsfolk were feeling nervous, accused of sorcery. That's not a joke. Women who brewed alone were often suspected of using strange charms or chanting over their vats. You remember hearing the phrase brew witches. It used to sound silly. Now it sounds like protection. The curtain rustles again. She steps out, cloak removed, sleeves rolled. She speaks briefly with the barmaid, a few words, a glance, a nod. Then she walks through the room like she owns every beam, every nail, every breath. And maybe she does. You watch as she stops at the stranger's table. He looks up, startled. She doesn't sit, just stands, and says nothing. He gulps the rest of his ale and rises, mumbling thanks. She doesn't reply, just follows him to the door, sees him out, and closes it behind him. No drama, no explanation, just gone. The fiddler doesn't miss a note, and the cat settles back down. The alewife latches the door behind her calmly, like she's done it 100 times. No rush, no spectacle. The stranger is gone, and with him, whatever trouble might have been brewing. The room doesn't applaud. It doesn't speak. But something releases. Shoulders loosen. Mugs rise again, and a man near the fire even lets out a quiet belch of relief. The tavern breathes again. She walks back across the room, weaving between tables as if she were navigating a field she'd ploughed herself. And maybe she has. You start to understand that this tavern isn't just her workplace. It's her web. Every thread, every knot, every tangle of debt or favour or quiet threat eventually leads back to her hands. She stops at your table, you freeze. She picks up your mug, sniffs it, tilts it, then drinks the last sip without asking. She smacks her lips once, sets the mug down and says, "That batch'll hold, for now." Then she moves on. You don't know whether to be honoured or concerned. A man across the room laughs quietly. She's tasted worse. Once said the 1382 mash turned green. His companion nods. Still sold it. Called it spring ale. You hear other tales too. Whispers of how she once brewed with thistle because the hops went sour. How she knew which herbs dulled pain and which ones made you forget your name for a night. How she could look in your eyes and know if you'd paid or were about to steal. But there's something else. Respect. Not fear, not flattery. Not the kind of forced obedience people show a lord or a reeve. Real respect. The kind that grows from usefulness. From knowing when to bend, when to bark, and when to slip something strong into a weaker man's cup to stop him from doing something stupid. She moves behind the bar now, doesn't pour, doesn't measure, just watches. Her eyes skim the room like a ledger written in movement. The barmaid joins her. They speak in low tones, with the shorthand of women who've survived too much together to waste time on full sentences. One tilts her head toward the fireplace, the other toward the stairwell. You can't hear what they're saying, but you understand enough. They know everything. A young man stumbles in from the back door, mud on his knees, a stupid grin on his face. "Had to see a man about a mule," he says, brushing off his tunic like anyone asked. The alewife raises one eyebrow. He turns on his heel and leaves again. Another story snuffed before it starts. You think about all the taverns in this region, how many survive on thinned ale and empty rumour, but not this one. This one has a backbone, and she's standing behind the bar, arms crossed, daring the night to try anything clever. She pours herself a mug, 1 finger's worth, drinks it, nods once, and finally smiles. Not sweetly, not warmly, Just enough to remind you that she's not just the brewer. She's the guardian of the barrels, of the stories, of the rules that no one writes down, but everyone follows. The fiddler sees her raise her mug and shifts his tune again, something older, steadier, with a heartbeat built into the bow strokes. The fire cracks, the cat sighs, and you realise this isn't just her tavern, it's her kingdom. And tonight, you're just lucky to be passing through it in one piece. The fire's burned low again. It always does at this hour, reduced to a bed of glowing embers and the occasional crack of a half-burned log splitting under its own weight. But the room is still warm, not from flame, but from breath, from bodies, from lives pressed too close together in a space too small to keep secrets. You shift on the bench, noticing, again, how sticky it's become. Your boots stick to the rushes with every move, and something squelches under your heel. You don't look down. Instead, you look toward the bar where the tavern keeper is writing. Yes, writing. Not openly, not on a scroll or a ledger set out to be admired, but in a small book bound in dark leather, hidden half behind the cask. You wouldn't have noticed it if the candle hadn't caught the shimmer of his quill just right. He doesn't write names, not that you can see. He writes symbols, marks, lines, a kind of private shorthand. A stroke here, a cross there. You wonder how many mugs each mark represents, or how many debts. This is the other side of the tavern, not the stew, not the music, but the math of it. Because every mug poured, every bowl scraped, every bet lost and coin pocketed has to be tracked, somehow. Especially in a place where no one pays all at once, and some never pay at all. You start to notice more. That man who's had 5 mugs but only passed coin twice. Marked. The old woman who has slipped a crust and a bit of meat earlier. Not marked at all, because it's not just about money, it's about credit. Not the banking kind, the human kind. Who's worth trusting? Who's never lied? Who helped patch a roof last winter? Who once threw a punch for the wrong reason? It's all in the book. You're not even sure if the alewife knows about it. But the barkeep does. You glance toward him now. He's old, but not frail. His face is like worn leather, toughened by years of smoke and hard conversation. His hands are broad, with ink-stained fingertips and a chipped fingernail on his right thumb. He writes with the focus of a man carving into stone. And you get the feeling that if you ever crossed him, your name wouldn't need to be spoken aloud, just scratched out in silence. A man approaches the bar, nervously, young, wiry. You recognize him from earlier. He lost badly at dice, spilled his stew, didn't speak much. He whispers something to the barkeep. The barkeep doesn't reply, just glances down at the book. Then he nods, reaches behind the counter, and produces a small sack. It clinks faintly. The young man takes it with both hands, bows his head, and disappears out the back. The barkeep closes the book. No coin exchanged, no receipt. But a transaction all the same. Maybe it was a loan. Maybe it was a warning. You don't ask. Because in this place, knowledge is like bread, shared in pieces, never whole. And the barkeep? He doesn't bake the bread. He counts the crumbs. The barkeep stows the little book beneath the counter, its leather cover vanishing into the shadows like a blade back into its sheath. Conversation flows again around you, chatter about sheep prices, a distant cousin's sudden marriage, and a vague joke about someone finding a toe in their boot that wasn't their own. But your mind stays with the ledger, because once you've seen it, you start to see everything differently. That man in the corner with only 1 mug in front of him, he's on his 4th pour. The barmaid fills it without asking for coin. You notice how she glances at the barkeep each time, and how he gives the faintest nod, barely more than a twitch of an eyebrow. It's not random, it's measured. Because this tavern doesn't run on money, it runs on memory. And memory, here, is a currency as sharp as any blade. You hear a clatter near the hearth, 2 men arguing over who owes whom for the last round. The taller one insists he paid. The shorter one swears he paid twice. They're getting louder. The room tenses. Even the cat raises its head. The barkeep sighs. He doesn't shout, doesn't threaten, just raises one hand slowly. Both men freeze. Then he lifts a finger, points to the taller man. The man stares, then deflates. He mutters something into his cup, digs out a coin and sets it on the table. The barkeep lowers his hand, and the moment is over. That's the power of the book. It remembers even when you lie, even when you forget, even when you swear up and down that you've never even seen that goat, let alone taken it. It's not just debts and drinks he tracks, it's behaviour. He knows who runs when the watch comes, who ducks under tables, who walks in with a smile and leaves with a bruise, and who, no matter how drunk or desperate, always pays in the end. You start to wonder if you are in the book, if your muddy boots and wide eyes have earned you a mark, if your silence so far counts in your favour, or if it's made you suspicious, and that's when you realise there's a second ledger, not written in ink, written in looks. You catch one from the barmaid now, just a flick of her eyes, assessing, measuring. The alewife seated near the back now, not drinking, just watching. Even the old fiddler between strokes of his bow glances your way now and then, as if composing a tune in your name, because here everyone gets written down, one way or another, if not in the barkeep's book, then in someone's memory. And in a tavern where money is scarce and survival is tight, memory is the law. You hear someone whisper near the fire, "He's on the red page now." The words send a ripple across the room. You don't know what the red page is, but you know enough not to ask, because once you're on it, you're not likely to be erased. The night stretches on, thick and slow, like treacle poured over cold bread. The fire's down to glowing coals now, casting just enough light to blur the edges of faces and sharpen the edges of suspicion. You're not tired, not exactly, but the hours press on your shoulders like a blanket woven from silence and smoke. Across from you, a woman lowers herself onto the bench with a practiced sigh. Not young, not old. Somewhere in that weathered middle where years stop counting forward and start layering sideways. Her hands are cracked, fingers swollen at the joints, her knuckles stained with something darker than soot. You nod in polite acknowledgement. She doesn't smile, but she doesn't look away either. Instead, she leans an elbow on the table and says, "Funny, isn't it? People think the men run this place." You glance toward the barkeep, then the fiddler, then the loudest drinker near the dice. She follows your gaze and chuckles, soft and dry. "Men make the noise," she says, "but the women know who listens." She's not the only one. You begin to notice it now. The quiet web running beneath the surface, through glances, shared nods, unfinished sentences. The barmaid is part of it. So is the cook, who hasn't emerged in over an hour but somehow has her stew bowls in every hand. Even the girl sweeping by the stairs, the one who said 3 words all night, pauses near certain tables just long enough to overhear things no one meant to be heard. These women aren't just serving, they're studying. They're the ones who remember which merchant always overpays when he's guilty, who know that the carpenter's apprentice never looks a woman in the eye unless he's lying, who've seen the mayor's clerk slip out the back door when he thinks no one's watching. The woman in front of you pours something from a small flask into her cup, offers you none. She takes a sip and continues. "I've worked here since the roof leaked so bad we used pails for the rain and the ale, and I've seen every kind of man walk through that door. Big ones, loud ones, pretty ones, thieves in velvet, saints in rags. You know what they all forget? You wait. They forget we see them. Behind her, the barmaid catches your gaze. She's speaking to a group of younger patrons near the hearth, refilling mugs, laughing at a joke you can't hear. But her eyes? Still watching you. Still watching everything. The woman leans closer. Someone upstairs tonight. She's working for bread. Someone else downstairs, working for gossip. Both are smarter than the men who paid them. You hear a snort near the hearth. A man rises, clutching his mug like it's the last honest thing in the room. He stumbles, spills a little on his boot, and curses loud enough to make the cat stir. A few chuckles ripple across the room. "See," she mutters, "they play at power. We keep the keys." You ask her what she means by keys. She gives you a long look. Not the ones for doors, love. The ones for remembering. Then she finishes her drink, stands up and walks away. You're left staring at the mark her cup left on the table. 2 faint rings side by side like a symbol you don't quite understand. But you will. Because in this tavern, women don't speak loudly. They don't need to. They're the ones who remember everything. She disappears into the back, through a narrow wooden door you hadn't noticed before. One of those doors that isn't meant for guests. It closes behind her without a sound. No latch, no lock, just finality. You look around again, seeing everything differently now. At the table near the window, a younger woman with straw-coloured hair is darning a sock by candlelight, not her own. She glances up between stitches, eyes flicking across the room, following conversation she's not part of. Every so often, she folds the sock and slides it into a satchel at her feet, alongside what must be 10 others. A basket of coins would be louder than that bag. Hers makes no sound at all. She doesn't drink, but every hour someone slides her half a bowl of stew or a crust of bread. No one speaks to her directly. No one needs to. You realise she knows everyone's weaknesses, who walks with a limp, who hides bruises, who never stays in one place for more than a week. And while the louder men brag and bluff and lose coin at dice, she's collecting more than socks. She's collecting stories. A new woman steps into the tavern now, tall, tightly laced bodice, hair pinned with care. The laughter grows a touch louder. A few men sit up straighter. One tugs at his collar. Another pretends to clean his nails with a table knife. She says nothing, just walks the length of the room with deliberate steps and stands near the fire. Her hands rest lightly on her hips. She's not looking for attention. She's expecting it. And she gets it. Even the fiddler shifts his tune slightly, leaning into something more graceful. A bow to her entrance, subtle as smoke. But she's not just here for admiration. She's watching too. You see it in the way her eyes linger on the barkeep's fingers as he tallies a mark, on the way she notes who pays with coin and who with charm. She's reading the room not for entertainment, but for leverage. You start to understand. The women in this tavern aren't background. They are the archive. They hold the memory of debts unpaid and favours quietly exchanged. They remember who stood when the fight broke out, who flinched when the name of the Duke's steward was mentioned, who reached for their knife too quickly, who reached for their purse too slowly. You see now how this place survives, not through coin or ale or stew, but through quiet mastery, through hundreds of unspoken calculations made over fire and ferment and the rhythmic sweep of a straw broom. The woman near the fire finally speaks, not loud, not soft, just enough. They'll come looking for him tomorrow, she says, not naming who, but he'll already be gone. The room doesn't ask who she means, because most of them already know. The barmaid nods once from the bar. The woman who vanished behind the door earlier, she knew hours ago. And you? You're starting to feel the weight of everything you've said tonight. Every sentence, every glance. Because in this tavern, words don't vanish. They settle like dust. They stain like ale. And somewhere someone remembers exactly what you said. Long after you've forgotten. You reach for your mug again. It's gone lukewarm, so you drink anyway. Not to forget, but to buy yourself a little silence. The tavern shifts again, not all at once, but you feel it, like a pressure drop before a storm. The hum of music pauses just briefly. A stool tips, a mug slips, a laugh stutters mid-air and never quite finishes. Then a sharp crack echoes from the dice table. Not wood, bone. You turn your head too fast, and so does everyone else. Two men stand, one taller, his face already red with rage, the other hunched and wild-eyed, hands up in a half shrug, half shield. A small pile of coins lies scattered between them, still rolling from where they'd been slapped across the table. "No way you rolled that clean," the red-faced one growls, reaching toward his belt. "Wasn't even my throw," the other snaps back, backing up a step. And just like that, the tavern folds inward. It doesn't explode. No chaos, no yelling crowd. But it coils. You feel it in the air, in how people slide their benches back, how a few patrons gather their cloaks close and retreat into shadows. A man near the fire subtly shifts a stool out of the way, clearing space. The barkeep stiffens. The barmaid doesn't move. Not yet. The taller man lunges across the table. The dice scatter. A mug flies. The hunched man tries to duck but catches a blow to the side of the head and crashes into a bench. Someone yells. Another person swears. The cat darts under a table like it's done this before. The fight is fast, ugly, and close. Not swords. No drawn knives yet. Just fists. Buckles. Broken wood. The taller man grabs what might have been a leg of meat or a table leg and swings. Misses. The other claws for the fallen coin purse. Maybe to prove a point, maybe to steal it. Either way, too late. The barmaid's voice cuts through the air. Enough. But fists don't listen, so she doesn't wait. She moves like she's done it before, across the floor in 4 quick steps, grabbing the nearest bucket by the fireplace. Not water, something murkier. She hurls it. It hits both men square across the chest. The smell hits you a moment later. It's the mop bucket, stew, ale, soot, dishwater, floor juice, laced with a few dead rushes and something that might once have been a beet. The fight stops, not from shame, from shock. The men stagger back, dripping. The room is silent, watching, holding its breath not from fear, but from habit, waiting. The barkeep steps forward, doesn't speak, just gestures to the door. The men glance at each other, then back at him, and without another word they leave. The taller man grabs his cloak on the way out. The other limps after him, shoes squelching with each step. No one claps, no one cheers. This isn't a show, it's routine. The door swings shut behind them, and slowly, almost wearily, the tavern breathes again. The barmaid mutters something about wasting stew, then fetches the mop. You sit in silence, heart still thudding, wondering how close that came to real damage. A knife, a skull, a death. But the tavern has survived worse, and it knows how to survive still. The smell lingers longer than the fight, even as the barmaid mops the floor, her strokes methodical, like she's scrubbing not just grime but memory. The room bears the weight of what just happened. A few patrons wrinkle their noses. One man mutters something about cabbage water and regret. But no one complains aloud, because if there's one thing worse than a brawl in a tavern, it's being noticed for reacting to it. So the fiddler starts up again, gently at first, like he's coaxing the tavern back from the edge. A lilting, forgettable tune. Background music for rebuilding the illusion of calm. Conversations resume. staggered and cautious, as if people need to rehearse the first few lines again. You sip your ale. It tastes different now, not worse, just altered. Across the room, the barmaid dumps the bucket and wrings out the mop with one practice flick. Her sleeves are soaked. A smear of something clings to her apron. She doesn't care. She finishes, props the mop against the wall, and picks up a broken bowl from under the dice table. "Third one this month," she mutters, mostly to herself. The barkeep says nothing, just makes another mark on something behind the bar, and that's when you notice the ceiling. Above the spot where the fight broke out, there's a long brown stain, just slightly darker than the rest of the timbers. It runs along the beam, curves down a little, and ends in a faint splatter mark on the wall. You ask the man next to you about it. He glances up, shrugs. "That's from the fight 2 winters back," he says. "Man bit off a piece of someone's ear and flung it." You blink. He nods solemnly. "It stuck, for a while." You don't ask how long. The tavern carries these marks like a butcher's block. Deep grooves, scars, places worn smooth from repetition. Each one a story, half remembered, half avoided. You realise then that this is part of the tavern's character. It expects violence, not because it wants it, but because it's seen what happens when people have too little coin and too much memory. A woman near the window lifts her skirt just enough to inspect her shin. A fresh bruise. Not from the fight. Likely from the bench tipping during the commotion. She rubs it once, sighs, and keeps eating. The man who was sleeping beneath a table earlier now sits upright, rubbing his eyes like nothing happened. He looks around, spots an abandoned mug, sniffs it, then downs the rest with a satisfied grunt. Near the fire, the cat returns to its post, stepping around a piece of broken clay like it's done this dance 12 times. You watch the tavern stitch itself back together, seam by seam. The broom returns to its place behind the door. The barmaid swaps out her apron. A fresh pot is set on the fire. Someone offers a toast. Not loud, not meaningful, just something to get the room moving again. It works, because that's how the tavern survives, not by avoiding conflict, but by swallowing it, scrubbing the stain, and serving another round before the blood dries. And in that quiet acceptance there's a kind of grace, not nobility, just endurance. At first glance you'd think the regulars were just drinkers who never left. But after enough hours, enough bowls, and enough silences, you realise they're not here because they're drunk. They're here because this is the only place where their lives still make sense. The man with the lopsided beard and one good boot, he always sits at the second table from the fire, never the first, never the third. He mutters to himself between sips, recounting the same tale each night about the fish that got away, longer every time. He hasn't caught a fish in years. He doesn't need to. No one corrects him. They just nod. Because everyone here has a version of a fish. A lie they tell for comfort, not deception. Across from him is a couple, maybe husband and wife, maybe just 2 people who sit together often enough that no one questions it. They share a single mug between them, back and forth, never out of sync. You don't know if they speak much outside these walls, but here their silence is companionable. Then there's the big man who always brings a stool instead of a chair. He says it's better for his back, though he slouches just the same. Every hour he carves the tiniest notch into the underside of the table with a rusted nail. You once asked him what it was for. He didn't answer. The next morning there was a fresh notch. The tavern doesn't just feed people, it houses them. Not in the upstairs rooms, those are for the passing troubles, the travelling regrets. But down here, in the firelight and the rot, this is where the faithful gather. Faithful not to the ale, but to the rhythm of familiarity, of sitting in the same seat, of nodding to the barkeep at the same moment every time, of watching the barmaid sweep the same pattern around the same knot in the floorboards, as if the building itself might shatter if she changed her route. There's an older woman who always brings a string of dried lavender. She never drinks, just sits, eyes half closed, humming some wordless tune. You heard someone whisper she used to be a midwife. Another says she lost all her children in a fever and sings to their ghosts. No one asks her to stop. No one ever will. Because in the tavern, the regulars are part of the foundation. Their habits, their quirks, their quiet superstitions, they hold the beams in place. They keep the fire honest. They watch the door so no one has to say when something feels off. The barmaid knows every one of them. When to cut them off. When to slip them extra stew. When to tell them, softly, firmly, that tonight is not the night to ask for more. She nods to one now, the man with the long braid who always gives her the last bite of his bread. He lost a toe last winter, didn't complain, just hobbled in the next night with a walking stick and a grin. He's already tapping his mug in that familiar rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. The table next to him joins in, then another. You watch as they create a beat. Together, one that isn't music and isn't noise, it's belonging, and you realise you're starting to learn it. The tapping fades as naturally as it began, like a bird taking flight in a gust of wind. No one acknowledges it out loud, no cheers, no clapping, just the slow return to sipping, murmuring, breathing. But something has shifted. You feel it in your chest. This isn't a place where people simply are. It's a place where people remain. The woman with the lavender has left now, her empty seat still warm. A younger man takes it without asking, but he places the small string of dried flowers she left behind on the edge of the table, untouched. A gesture, a respect. Another regular enters. You know him now by the limp, by the way he never removes his hat indoors. He gets the same drink every time. Small beer, no foam, served in the chipped mug with the iron handle. He never asks for it. It's just there, waiting when he reaches the bar. You start to realise every mug, every bench, every seat by the wall has a claim on it. Not written, not spoken, but known. And God help the traveller who tries to sit where he shouldn't. You saw it once. Hours ago now, maybe days in tavern time. A man with a fine coat sat in the spot by the fire. An older farmer arrived 10 minutes later and stopped cold. Didn't say a word, just stood there. And the room watched. The coatman laughed, lifted his mug, offered to share the bench. But no one laughed with him. Eventually he moved. Not because anyone forced him, but because the silence did. That's how this place works. Not through rules, through ritual. You watch the barmaid brush crumbs from a man's collar. Not flirtatious, just familiar, like she's done it 100 times. The man says nothing, just nods once in thanks. She refills his mug halfway. That's all he can afford tonight. She knows it. At the far table, a woman lays out small wooden tokens in a pattern only she understands. She does it every night. Always at that table. She doesn't speak. She just arranges them. They're not for gambling. They're not for decoration. They're for balance. No one interrupts her, not even the barkeep. It dawns on you. This tavern, for all its filth and shouting and stew of questionable origin, is a sanctuary. Not for saints, for survivors, for people who've bent under the weight of winters, who've carried too many names and not enough coins, who've cried into sleeves and dug too many graves, who've said too much or said nothing at all, but still come back here because here, the floorboards don't ask questions, they just creak in recognition. The fiddler rests now. His bow lies across his knees like a sleeping dog. But even he listens, because the sounds in this room, the sighs, The clinks, the quiet muttering, are their own kind of music. You sip the last of your ale, cold now. But it doesn't matter, because you're not drinking for warmth anymore. You're drinking to stay, to be part of the rhythm, however briefly, to be known, even if no one says your name. And as the cat returns to your bench, curling beside your ankle like you've always belonged here, you begin to wonder, maybe, just maybe, you do. The door creaks open again, but this time, no one flinches. It's not the watch, it's someone worse, the constable. You can tell before he speaks, just by the hush that spreads like spilled oil across the room. He steps in as though the very floorboards owe him respect, muddy boots marking every inch of rushes like he owns them, and in a way, he does. Not through law, through loopholes. He's not here to arrest anyone. That would require paperwork, witnesses, a magistrate's attention. He's here for something far simpler and far more profitable. Tax, or the tavern version of it. He strolls to the bar, wide belt bouncing against his hips, fingers tapping a rhythm on the wooden surface. He doesn't order a drink. He doesn't need to. The barkeep, wordless, reaches beneath the counter and sets out a small sack. The constable lifts it, weighs it in his palm, nods, then turns, slowly, scanning the room like he's choosing which sheep to trouble. His eyes settle on a merchant near the wall. "You've been here 3 nights, he says, voice slick. "I don't recall you signing the visitors page." There is no visitors page. The merchant knows this. Everyone knows this. But the man says nothing, just fumbles for a coin. "Not that one," the constable says without looking. "Try again." He does. Another nod. The constable moves on. A boy at a table near the hearth stiffens. Too young to be in here, technically. Maybe the son of a weaver or a runaway with a forged story. The constable stops, leans down close. "Curfew," he whispers. The boy stares straight ahead. The barmaid appears suddenly beside them. "He's waiting for his father," she says coolly. "The one fixing your back gate." The constable blinks, recalculates, steps back without a word. Because even men like him know when not to press. The tavern may not wear a badge, but it has its own authority. Still, he doesn't leave right away. He paces, observes, picks up a piece of bread from someone's plate and sniffs it like he's inspecting for contraband, then eats it. You watch, sick with the realization that none of this is unusual. These are the rules you weren't told. The constable doesn't enforce the law. He extracts value from it. Illegal ale? That depends who brewed it. Dice game? Fine, if he's paid to ignore it. A woman working the stairwell too obviously? Well, unless she slipped him a side fee. The barkeep doesn't look at him again, nor does the alewife. The barmaid has returned to pouring drinks, her face unreadable. This is the quiet arrangement they all live under. Pay him, tolerate him, forget him, until next week. He finally turns to leave, but not before tossing a coin onto the dice table. "Carry on," he says with a smile too wide for the room. And just like that, he's gone. The door closes. The tavern stays silent for a beat too long. Then the fiddler starts up again. No melody, just a low drone, a note of disgust. You look around, and for the first time you see it. The whole room, united in one thing, hatred of the constable. They can't fight him, but they remember him. And in this tavern, that's worse. The coin he left behind still sits on the dice table untouched. Not out of forgetfulness, out of refusal. One of the players nudges it with the edge of his sleeve, pushing it toward the fire. Another leans over and flicks it hard. It clinks twice across the flagstones, comes to rest near the hearth, and no one picks it up. Because in here, not all money's equal, and some coins are tainted the moment they touch your hand. The tavern exhales again, but not with ease, more like after a coughing fit. People return to their mugs, their stew, their dice. But their eyes dart quicker now. Their laughs are shorter. The heat from the fire feels thinner. You overhear someone near the bar mutter, "He'll be back before the week's out. Watch." A nod. "He always is." Another voice. "Last time he came, he dragged poor Ewan out by the collar for forgetting to tip him on his birthday." There's a grim chuckle at that, followed by silence. Because Ewan didn't come back. Not to the tavern. Not to anywhere. You notice a new sign posted above the hearth now. Rough parchment. Smudged ink. It reads, "No credit. No curfew. No excuses." Someone's crossed out, "No curfew" in charcoal. Underneath, someone else has written, "Unless you're him." The barmaid sees you reading. "We leave it up for the joke," she says, "not the rule." You ask if the constable ever goes too far. She raises an eyebrow. "He did once." She doesn't finish the story. She doesn't have to, because just then the boy by the hearth gets up. Quietly. He walks to the bar and places a single coin, his last by the look of it, on the counter. The barkeep slides him a half mug, pours water into the rest. The boy drinks it like it's holy. You watch him. He's not just drinking to warm up. He's drinking to stay awake, to stay seen. If he walks home now, alone, and the constable's still near the edge of town, you understand. And so does the barmaid. She wipes her hands, unties her apron, and nods to the barkeep. Then she grabs a lantern and says, "Come on, lad. Walk me to the mill road." He blinks. "But you're taller than me. I'm frightened." A lie, a soft one. The boy catches it, but he nods anyway. They leave together, lantern swaying like a slow heartbeat in the dark. The cat trails behind them. No one says goodbye. They don't need to. This is what the tavern does. It absorbs harm, shields the foolish, covers debts with silence, and protects dignity by pretending not to notice when your hands shake too much to lift a mug. The fiddler changes tune again. This one sounds like walking, like wind, like two people slipping past something dangerous without being noticed. You look at the coin still resting near the hearth. It's begun to turn black at the edges. Or maybe that's just the firelight playing tricks on you. Either way, no one moves to touch it, and no one ever will. Some hours, or is it days, later you find yourself in a smaller back room of the tavern, not by invitation, just by flow. That's how this place works. You follow the tide of the night, and sometimes the tide takes you through a crooked archway where the candles burn lower. The laughter is quieter, and the stakes are much, much higher. This isn't the dice room. This is the whisper room. There are no chairs scraped loudly here. No spilled ale. Just a cluster of regulars hunched over the table in the centre, their faces half-shadowed, eyes flickering with the dance of a single beeswax candle. You sit because someone shifts slightly. That's the only invitation you're going to get. At first, nothing is said. The quiet hum of the main tavern seems far away now, like a distant song from another world. In here, every breath feels magnified. You can hear someone's sleeve rustling, someone's stomach growling, someone's knuckle cracking as he drums it on the wood in time to his own anxious thoughts. Finally a voice. She's back. Everyone stops. You glance around. No one needs to ask who. Where? 3 streets over, behind the old tannery, selling herbs again. Someone swears under his breath. Someone else mutters, "She'll get herself hanged." An older man speaks. She's not wrong, though. We haven't had proper balm since spring. And the apothecary? He won't touch anything unless the reeve approves it first. This isn't a gossip room. This is survival strategy. You realise slowly that these aren't just idle murmurs. These people are planning, not rebellion, endurance. A way to get food into the widow's kitchen without the tithe-taker noticing. A way to sneak wood past the gatekeeper when he's drunk on Friday evenings. A way to rotate who watches the Reeves clerk when he comes nosing around on tax week. This room is the nervous system of the tavern. The main room is the muscle, the movement, the noise. But here is where decisions are made. Someone pulls out a parchment. You hear the soft scrape of charcoal. Who still got their mark? One by one they nod. You do too, because that's what you're expected to do, even if you don't know what you're agreeing to, yet. Then someone grins, not cruelly, but with a quiet, dangerous warmth. Remember the last time she brewed that cough tonic, he says? Half the village went quiet for a week. Chuckles rise, not from poison, just relief. Even now, in this tight corner of town life, you realise laughter is rationed, but not forbidden. A small woman in a patched red shawl catches your eye. She's old, frail-looking, but her eyes are clear and dry. "You're new," she says. You nod. "Don't matter," she continues. "Just listen. Don't write anything down and never repeat names outside this room." You nod again. "Good," she says. "Now someone pass me that wine jug. My knees are talking louder than my mouth." Even the conspirators, it seems, are not immune to joint pain. The jug passes from hand to hand, more carefully than you'd expect, like it's carrying something heavier than wine. Maybe it is. Maybe what it carries is trust. The old woman takes a swig, then wipes the rim with her sleeve. She doesn't speak again. She doesn't need to. Her presence is weight enough. In fact, everyone falls quiet as though her sip has closed the circle. Then the barkeep appears, not through the main door, through a smaller one, almost hidden, tucked behind a hanging of old wool. He nods once, doesn't speak, but that one nod is a paragraph. The man with the parchment folds it in half. The woman in the red shawl tucks the folded note into her sleeve, and the meeting, as if snapped back to silence by some invisible command, dissolves. No dramatic exit, no chants or handshakes, just bodies returning to the tavern floor, one at a time, like nothing ever happened. You linger a moment longer, unsure. Then you too rise. Back out in the main room, the contrast is jarring. The laughter is back. The fiddler is playing something bouncy now, a drinking tune. Feet tap the floor. A man stumbles while trying to spin a partner too quickly and lands with the thud on the rushes. Applause erupts. No one would ever guess the room behind the curtain exists. No one would guess the names you just heard. The plan tucked into a sleeve. The quiet defiance brewing like something stronger than ale. You realise now that the tavern isn't just one place. It's layers stacked on top of each other. To the casual eye, it's just a place for a pint and a warm seat. To the sharper eye, it's a market, a post office, a soup kitchen and a courtroom. And to those behind the wool curtain, it's a parliament of the poor, the powerless, and the practical. The barmaid catches your eye again, this time with a different look. Not the earlier wariness, something more measured, like she's seen you now. Not just looked at you, but seen you, and decided you can stay. You nod. She nods back, and in that small exchange you've been marked. Not in ink, not in speech, but in memory, and in a place like this that means something. You return to your corner, where your drink still waits, lukewarm now, but familiar. The cat is curled in your seat. You sit beside it. The fiddler begins another tune, something slower this time. You watch the faces of the tavern anew. You wonder which ones have their own marks, tucked into sleeves, behind eyes. Which ones know the names you just heard whispered, and which ones are still waiting for their moment to step behind the curtain. You won't forget the way it smelled in there, like old wood and beeswax and damp wool. You won't forget the sound of the charcoal scratching on parchment. You won't forget her voice, or the way every single one of them stopped when she spoke. You won't forget, because now you're part of it. By now your body has gone slack with warmth, and your limbs no longer care what time it is. But the tavern doesn't sleep. Not entirely. It shifts. The fire burns lower. The fiddler stops playing, gives his strings one last pluck, and retreats upstairs with a nod. The laughter has dulled to murmurs, and the clink of mugs is less frequent. This is the grey hour. When the loudest guests have staggered home, the whisperers have sealed their plans, and those left behind are the ones too tired, too haunted, or too clever to go out into the dark just yet. That's when you notice her. She's been sitting there for some time, maybe all night, at the small table near the back wall, where the candle's always half melted and never replaced. Her shawl is thick but worn. Her hands are wrapped around a bowl that's long been empty. And her eyes aren't watching the room. They're waiting for someone. At first, you assume it's a lover or a son or a debtor. But then she stands, not quickly, not slowly, but with the weight of ritual, and moves toward the back door. Not the front where patrons leave, but the side one used by those who owe or are owed. The barmaid watches her go, doesn't stop her, just lowers her gaze and continues wiping mugs that don't need wiping. When the door closes behind the woman, you ask quietly, "Who is she?" The barmaid doesn't look up. "Widow Dereth," she says. "Still keeps the candle lit, they say, even if no one's come knocking in years." That would be the end of it, just another sorrow drifting through the wood smoke, except the man beside you speaks up. "She used to run the tavern, before the flood." You blink. "There was a flood?" He nods. "Not the kind that fills your boots, the kind that drowns your name." He goes quiet, letting that settle in your ribs, but your curiosity bites. You press gently. "What happened?" He sighs, drains his mug and says, "Once the tavern was hers. She and her husband ran it better than the Reeve ran the village. Fair prices, hot stew, even kept thieves out by sheer reputation. Then a travelling taxman accused them of underreporting. Just like that, the sheriff seized the ledgers and her husband disappeared." You wait, he continues. "They say he vanished into the woods. Others say the sheriff made sure he wouldn't return. Dereth wasn't charged, but they took the tavern, said it needed a steadier hand." You glance toward the bar. "She stayed," he shrugs. "Didn't argue, didn't leave, just sat at that table, every night, waiting." "For justice?" you ask. "For proof," he replies, "that people remember." You let that hang in the air a moment, like a coat too heavy to wear but too shameful to fold away. Then he adds, "She never drinks, just orders stew. One bowl, same as the night he left." You look again toward the side door. Nothing stirs. Just the faint sound of night air pressing against old hinges and a ribbon of fog curling inward, like it too is drawn to this place. "Why doesn't anyone help her?" you ask, too softly. The man shrugs, though his eyes don't move from the spot she left behind. "Because helping would mean admitting what was done, and folk round here are good at forgetting the uncomfortable bits." The barmaid finally speaks again. Her voice is low but firm. She doesn't want help. She wants witnesses. You don't ask what she means. You already know. You remember the parchment in the secret room. You remember the barkeep's nod. You remember the way the tavern feels like a body, some parts moving, some parts numb, and some parts still aching from an old wound that never healed right. As the fire crumbles into glowing coals, a quiet hush falls over the room. The taproom has become a kind of chapel, not of prayers, but of memory. The drunkards have drifted off, their heads nestled into cloaks and elbows, and the last of the stewpots has gone cold. The cat leaps from its perch and pads across the rushes, curling up beside an old boot near the hearth. You watch as the barmaid, tired but methodical, begins stacking the empty mugs. She works like someone who's done this more nights than she's counted. Like someone who understands this job is not about cleaning. It's about resetting the stage. The man beside you finally rises, groaning a bit as he does, then turns toward you. You'll learn if you stay long enough, he says. Taverns aren't built on beams and nails. They're built on remembering. You nod, not entirely sure why, but you do. He leaves through the front. The door doesn't creak. It groans, as if it too is reluctant to let go. Now only a few bodies remain. A snorer, a mutterer, the barmaid, and you. And yet it doesn't feel lonely. It feels like something ancient is still breathing in here. Something that's seen 1,000 nights like this one, and will see 1,000 more. You sip the last of your drink. It's gone warm and sharp, like memory. You sit back and listen to the floorboards settling. The barmaid hums something faint, a tune with no words, probably passed from hand to hand the way mugs are. Probably sung once to a sleeping child who now drinks from those very mugs. You don't speak again, you just stay. Not for lack of a better place, but because you know something important is happening here. Not loudly, not urgently, just steadily. The tavern, even as it quiets, remembers. And now, so do you. The morning doesn't arrive all at once, it seeps in, not with a bell, but with a draught, a hush, and a pale spill of light creeping under the door. You blink, then stretch, gently, because your bones have stiffened from hours hunched in a corner bench. The barmaid has long since gone, replaced by a man you didn't see last night. His beard is thick, peppered with flour, and his hands move without needing thought. Bread is rising in the hearth oven. A new fire is being coaxed from coals. The air is different now, yeasty, smokier, still heavy with old ale, but cut through with the promise of breakfast. You glance around. Most of the night's inhabitants are gone. Only 2 remain, a man asleep face down on a table, and a woman quietly eating a heel of bread from her own pocket. No one speaks. You rise, stretch your back, and realize something peculiar. You don't feel like you're in the same place anymore. It's still the same tavern, same beams, same soot-blackened ceiling, same rushes on the floor. But the spirit of the place has shifted. The night version of the tavern, the one with secrets, songs and slow nods, has been packed away like a travelling show. What remains is the day version, more practical, less forgiving. You step outside, and instantly the cold slaps you awake. The street is slick with last night's drizzle. A chicken hops through a puddle near the corner. The thatch above you drips in steady rhythm. But already the village is stirring. A boy races by with a bucket in each hand, his tunic flapping wildly behind him. 2 women in heavy cloaks haggle over the price of turnips. A man with a sack of oats over his shoulder pauses to spit, nodding toward the tavern, and then you see it. The outside face of the building you just left. It's crooked, weathered, and patched in more places than you'd thought. The door leans slightly. The windows are clouded with grime. The sign, once bright, is faded into near illegibility. You wouldn't glance twice at it, not if you were just passing through, but you know better now. That door has seen revolts plotted and lovers reunited. That window has steamed over with laughter and tears. That bench inside, the one where the cat sleeps, was once occupied by a merchant who, legend says, threw a lord's entire plan into chaos by whispering the right words to the right ears over a mug of honeyed ale. The tavern looks ordinary, but now that you know, you can't unsee it. Just then, a horse-drawn cart rumbles by, the driver shouting something about firewood. You glance at the sign again. Still just a faded plank, still just a name, but now you know what it means. You linger in the doorway a moment longer, letting the cold seep through your sleeves, watching the sun stretch itself lazily across the rooftops. The village doesn't sparkle, it trudges. A dog limps across the mud, tail low but determined. Somewhere a blacksmith hammers once, twice, then falls quiet again, as if even the forge is rubbing sleep from its eyes. And in the middle of it all sits the tavern, looking exactly as it always has. But you can't help seeing it now as something more. Not sacred, not heroic, but essential. A kind of glue. And maybe that's the final truth about taverns. Not the stew, not the beer, not even the stories, but the way they hold things together. People drift in and out. Coins change hands. Names fade. But the walls remember. And not in some fairy tale way. They remember in scuffs and splinters, in burn marks near the hearth, in the worn groove where 1,000 boots have scraped mud off at the door. History doesn't hang in paintings, it lives in floorboards. You walk around the side, curious now, wanting to see what's hidden behind the main facade. There, nestled in the shadow of a collapsing fence, is something oddly touching. An old wooden barrel used as a planter, half full of rainwater and moss. A small sprig of thyme grows in it. You blink. Why would anyone plant herbs back here? Then you spot the small hand-painted slate tucked beneath a stone. For those who didn't make it home, you stare at the sign longer than you mean to. It's not elaborate. No name, no date, no carving. Just a simple offering. A reminder that some drank their last ale here. That not every goodbye was spoken aloud. That the tavern is not just a place for living, but for remembering the ones who vanished between the laughter and the dark. When you finally step back into the tavern, the mood has changed again. There's a pot of porridge bubbling over the coals. The bar smells faintly of onions and drying herbs. A new barmaid is lighting candles with practiced grace, and an old man is already nursing the first beer of the day. Not drunk, just thoughtful. You sit once more. Not because you must, but because you're not quite ready to leave. And as your breath slows and the spoon finds your hand, you realise this isn't the end of the story. It never is. Because taverns don't have endings. They only have shifts. One moment to the next. One person to the next. One truth folded gently into the next tall tale. And just like that, the day begins. There's a knock. Not at the front door, but from somewhere behind the tavern wall. You freeze mid-spoonful listening. Another knock, then a pause. The barmaid doesn't look up. She simply nods toward the back hallway and says, "Cellar hatch. Happens every so often. If you're curious, go on then." You hesitate, but your feet seem to move on their own. Past the hearth, past the jars of dried herbs and rows of pewter mugs. Into the narrow back passage where the walls close in and the air feels older, heavier. The stone underfoot is damp. The wood above groans like it knows your name, and then you see it. A thick trapdoor, iron-banded, set into the floor. It's already unlocked. The knock comes again. Once, then silence. You lift the hatch slowly. A cold gust rushes upward. Darkness yawns beneath. You descend the narrow steps, boots slick on mossy stone, and at the bottom you find not a monster, not a ghost, not some scandalous relic of forbidden times. You find shelves, crates, dust, and casks. So many casks. It's a storage room, but one with secrets. The torch flickers against the damp walls, revealing symbols etched into the wood. Marks of different brewers, some long gone. One barrel bears a crest, 3 fish on a blue shield. You vaguely recall from a conversation upstairs. Another is sealed with wax and twine, dated nearly a century ago. But then you spot something stranger. A narrow door in the far corner, half covered by hanging netting and a stack of cracked mugs. You push it open and step into a smaller chamber, one clearly unused in years. Here, the walls are carved with initials, hundreds of them. some in Latin script, others in barely legible scratches. There are dates too, some recent, some so old they predate the oldest gravestones in the village. This isn't just storage. This was a sanctuary, a place where people came to leave proof they'd been here. You run your hand along the grooves. One catches your eye, a name barely visible, followed by the word runaway. Another simply reads, "Cold winter, no bread, thank you." You wonder who wrote them, who drank here, who carved into stone so they wouldn't vanish altogether. Because maybe that's what taverns were, beneath it all, a place to declare, I was here, I mattered, I laughed, I drank, I lived. You close your eyes for a moment and let the stillness speak. A drip of water, a groan from the beams above, the faintest echo of footsteps. Then, footsteps again. But these are yours now, heading back up, leaving the cellar just as you found it, hatch closed, the morning returned. And somehow everything feels softer, like a weight has shifted. You return to the tap room, half expecting it to have changed again. And it has, but only in the quietest way. The old man has left. The porridge pot is nearly empty. A new group has arrived, farmhands this time, talking quietly over warm beer, mud still clinging to their boots. The barmaid is laughing now. Oh, tired laugh, but not unkind. You sit in your same seat. But this time when the barmaid approaches, she doesn't ask what you want. She simply sets a mug down with a nod and says, "You've got tavern eyes now." You raise a brow. "Tavern eyes?" She grins. "Means you've seen it. The whole of it. Not just the noise and the smell and the ale, but the truth, the grime and the glue, the things that don't make it into the stories." You take a sip. It's stronger than you expected, and better. You linger in your seat, warming your hands on the mug. Outside, the sky has turned the colour of tarnished pewter, and a drizzle has begun, soft and steady, painting the window panes in long silver trails. You let your breath fog the glass, and through it, the village blurs, chimneys, cloaks, the shuffle of carts and boots. But in here, time thickens. A voice beside you says, "Funny thing, these places. They see more truth than churches and more lies than courts." You glance sideways. It's a man in a heavy wool cloak, skin like cracked leather, hands that look carved from bark. He doesn't look at you, just speaks, then sips. "You know what the tavern was in my father's day," he goes on. "A rumour mill, a courtroom, a hospital, and a confession booth, all rolled into one." You smile, but say nothing. You've heard versions of this speech before, but this one feels earned, less performance, more offering. He turns to face you finally. You see a man drinking alone in the corner, and you think, poor soul. But maybe he's remembering his wife, or maybe he's hiding from debt collectors, or maybe, just maybe, he's a spy. Saw that once, swear to God. You both laugh at that, quiet, knowing. It's a moment. One of those moments the outside world doesn't record, but the tavern does. A flicker of connection. No contracts, no promises, just a shared warmth in a place built for cold. The man finishes his mug, stands, nods, and disappears into the drizzle. You remain. Not because there's something left to learn, but because you're not quite ready to return to the world beyond the tavern walls. It'll still be there. The mud, the rules, the noise, the small injustices and larger silences. But here, within these cracked beams and echoing floorboards, you've brushed up against something older than any kingdom. Not noble, not clean, but real. The tavern is not a sanctuary because it's safe. It's a sanctuary because it allows everything in. The drunk, the hungry, the joyful, the bitter, the ones who made their fortunes and the ones who lost them at dice the night before, the lonely, the loud, the broken, the hopeful, and all of them matter here. Even you. especially you. So you take one last sip, savour the grain, the warmth, the memory tucked beneath it, and you rise, not with reluctance, but with reverence. You brush crumbs from your tunic, pull your hood up against the mist and step out through the same crooked door that's welcomed 1,000 stories before yours. No one will record this moment, but the tavern has, in its own quiet way. And tomorrow, someone else will sit where you sat, ask what you asked, laugh how you laughed, and the cycle will begin again. Different face, same truth. That in the heart of the muddiest street behind the plainest door sits a world entire, alive with stories, fermented with memory and poured fresh each night. You walk away from the tavern slowly, each step soft in the rain-dampened earth. The chill outside is no longer biting. It's gentle now, familiar, the kind of cold that makes the fire inside you feel stronger. Your boots leave faint prints in the mud, soon to be washed away, but you don't mind. Not every trace needs to last. Some things are meant to pass quietly, like the whisper of a song remembered just before sleep. You glance back once. The tavern is still there, lantern flickering in the window, a silhouette leaning over the hearth. Someone else has taken your place, and that's exactly how it should be. Because the story doesn't end when you leave, it simply waits for the next weary traveller, the next quiet laugh, the next steaming bowl of stew or bitter sip of ale. You breathe in. The scent of smoke still clings to your sleeves, the memory hums low in your chest, and though the night grows deeper, you feel warmer somehow, like you've been let in on a secret you didn't know you needed. So now, as you lie down, wherever you are, let your breath slow. Let the weight lift. You've wandered through crooked halls and candlelit corners. You've tasted the grit and grace of a world both grimy and human. And now, it's time to rest. May your dreams be quiet and full of old laughter